1, 2, 3. I'll record the story real quick. So the story goes that I had thought it was okay to take pictures of it and to show my friends at work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it was on my phone and it was on my Facebook and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So I had my wife took a picture of it and I took a picture of it. And with, like 2020 cameras and stuff like that from phones, which are pretty
Mhm.
good. And then the and my laptop had it on there. I downloaded everything to that. So my laptop hard drive went down. I lost my phone in the ocean, and my wife
Hmm.
lost her phone in the river with those images, and we've never downloaded them.
Huh.
And it took me 6 or well, I said 2020. I think it was about 2018 actually. But anyway, whatever that timeline. But I would go up to my mom's house and look for this picture all over the place.
Yeah.
And whenever and I never found it. I went up there a few times. She lives about 7 hours away. I
Mhm.
never found it. And then I went ahead and my mom had to go into long-term care. And so I had all of her stuff. And that picture was in her wallet that I was never looked
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
But I found it again, so it's in a safe space, and it's a crazy. But like I said, the picture was taken back in the '60s, black and white, clouds, and then you see those images, and they're very just. The one is very obvious. The other one you gotta look. But you can see there's a solid image on one end, on one side, and then there's that faded image on the other.
Mhm.
One would be categorized as a uh, immortal being because it can fully be captured that way. Whereas the image of the child, which is still spirit, would be something that was being faded out.
Hmm.
So so it's quite interesting that idea. But anyway, so I appreciate my friend Jordan Grimsley.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Got it. So Jordan wanted to hear. We talked about the nature of God last time. We got through that a little bit. Now Jordan just wants to know why I believe what I believe,
Yeah.
and how do I follow such a denomination
Well,
as the
so not only that too, but so last time we had talked about how I think a majority of LDS members would say that God's name is like Elohim, and you had disagreed, I believe. And
Yeah.
so trying to say like, okay, one, why do you follow, kind of LDS, but then also why do you differ from some of their beliefs? Is I think the two things I was kind of asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I had a strange. I'm glad you asked that question there. I had a. I want actually you. I wanted to preempt this just a little bit.
Yeah.
You asked me about my fatigue level and whether I could survive or not. So
Yeah.
I had an occasion a few years ago where I was working 6 to 8 hour days, and I got 4 hours sleep going into work. And
Yeah.
about the fourth hour, I was leaning on a piece of equipment, about ready to drop off and go to sleep. And and I said a prayer. And in that prayer, I said, if you just give me somebody to talk to about, God, or just talk about you, or wherever that prayer seemed like, I said, I'm sure I'll be fine. And so I went. I was I went up and and I've talked to my supervisor, who we've got along together real good, and we've talked religion. I went up there and I talked to him for about 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And after that conversation, even at the 16th hour, I had more energy at the 16th hour of the day than I did when I first started that day.
Wow.
That's the kind of energy. So you would think, okay, so coincidence, all right. So same scenario that same day, because I work 16-hour days. So it rolls over to the next day, of course. So I got 4 hours sleep, went to work, 4 hours in, just dead as to the world. I said the same prayer, went to find the same victim. And sure enough, I had more energy at the 16th hour that day than I did when I started.
Wow.
So I came up with this little ditty. No Pepsi or tea, wait a minute. No coffee or tea and Pepsi or for me. Just a little word with God, and that's all I need.
Yeah.
And I'll be buzzing like a bee. But anyway, so what I'm saying is that this energized me. These conversations energize me. So it really helps me, helps me get adrenaline rushes and stuff like that, which helps. But anyway, I had this dream the other day, and it's kind of curious. I can't tell you the whole dream because I can't remember, but there was a significant part of that dream. But there was this transaction with a car, maybe it was stolen. I can't remember if I was part of the problem or I was the solution. I can't remember, but I know, but in that dream, I I I went and I knew where the car was, but I told the woman that it was stolen. And I went to, and I said, then I found out the car was worth 3 times as much she was trying to sell it for.
Mhm.
And I said, and then I came back with the car and I sat down with her. I said, well, I found the stolen car. And then I said, in my dream, subconsciously, I have this innate ability to reason that way. I said, ma'am, I just lied to you and I need to tell you the truth. So I told her the truth about the car and everything else. So I really don't, I struggle with, I mean, there's a story in my life that uh, went out, I was about 12 years old, I was 12 years old. And I remember, I did join the church when I was 9, but there was no connection to the church, really.
Mhm.
I just did it because it was it was kind of a pattern that was being set for me, not by my mom and dad, but by my great aunt, my great grandmother, and so on and so forth.
So you grew up LDS?
Well, I actually, we were just bouncing from church to church whenever before I moved to. So just to back up, I guess I should just to start a little bit back, but I wanted to make sure that what I'm saying in that story, I had went out, prayed about getting the priesthood, and I seen a friend of mine about 100 yards away, and here I'm praying for just with all the energy that I could muster up about praying, about receiving revelation, about whether I should become a deacon or not.
Mhm.
Nothing, just as nothingness. I'm like,
Yeah.
and then I seen a friend down the tracks. We lived on the tracks, near the tracks, with a canal nearby. And so I see my friend, he's about 100 yards away, and he was holding a rifle. So I went down there and he asked me, hey, you want to shoot him? I said, sure. And sure enough, I took a shot. It just into the sand or whatever, just to shoot it. It was a 22. And then when I got back home, um, my dad asked me about it, and he was quite agitated by it because the story goes that my great great let's see, great great uncle had been shot, or a great great uncle had been shot by a 22 a long time ago,
Mhm.
before my dad was born. But he knew the story, so he was worried about
Yeah.
that. He cared about me a lot, you know. But sure enough, I lied to him, and so he gave me a good swift kick or good swats, just to make
Yeah.
sure that he understood that and I understood that this wasn't right. But I never went to him and told him that I lied about that.
Yeah.
And it still burns me. It's still heavy on my heart today, even though that I know that I've been forgiven, even though that I know that all things have been made right by the atonement of Jesus Christ. I just can't get rid of it.
Mhm.
So so even though that didn't convince me that lying was not a good idea, but eventually it becomes a part of me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So much so that I hate to lie about anything, and I won't
Yeah.
lie. My wife hates me for that, but I can only imagine, because when the kids would say, when my wife would try to coax them into doing whatever, I would tell them the truth, whatever
Yeah.
they're eating or whatever. So anyway, so again, let's go back a little bit. My 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 dad's side of the family is from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl years. So very like one of the cousins back in the 1800s ran with Billy the Kid. His name was Fred Waite. Uh, and then the other my great grandfather and his father before him is Smith Paul, and he founded Paul's Valley. His son Sam Paul, who's my grandfather three times back, he was he just a gangster of a lawman. He was a
Hmm.
Chickasaw Indian, which he had authority with the Chickasaw police, or however you want to call it, and he was a U.S. Marshal. And he was the inspiration for the character Rooster Cogburn in the True Grit,
There you
portrayed by
go.
John Wayne and the Tom Barrett. I can't remember the one that paid it. I know who it
The,
is, but I can't
the
remember.
John Wayne one's much better.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So he's the inspiration, and he
Yeah, that's
was
crazy.
a thug of a lawman, and actually he knew 12 languages. Some people say 17. And then but like I said, he had he even got put in prison for a year because of his ways as a lawman. And then
Hmm.
Chester B. Arthur give him a pardon, who was the president at that time. So anyway, so we come from Oklahoma, and my family comes out about 41, 42. They're working the farms, they're in the uh, aircraft factories and stuff like that, whatever they can do to make money. Um, so we ended up in Bakersfield, or they ended up in Bakersfield. I was born in 65. Um, and I remember going through different denominations within the community, real impoverished area, a lot of drug activity, a lot of really bad stuff over there. And then, but we did have religion sporadically. I don't remember ever reading the Bible as a family at all. Uh, but I remember going to church, and when at a very young age, maybe 6 years old or whatever, by the time I could actually read, I they asked us to memorize the 23rd Psalms, and I was able to accomplish that even at that age.
Hmm.
But even though at that, because I hated school and I took every course I could to get out of it, lying about being sick and all that. Uh, but my reading was never good, and I had to go to remedial reading and comprehension.
Hmm.
And then even in the Air Force, when I went in there, they actually sent me to remedial reading and comprehension. But I think that was due to my ASVAB score, because it was really low. And the reason was low because I only got 2 hours sleep both times before I went to go take it. So they would, but there is some, there's some things that just don't connect, and whatever it is. But anyway, so that's my kind of that story. But whenever I was 9 years old, I got baptized, even though that my parents weren't members of the church, but they seen the advantage of that because my great aunt had the means to help us financially,
Hmm.
and she was a great woman at that, a great person, and my great grandmother was raising us. Also, she was part of the network of people that would help raise me. My great aunt actually, so when we moved from Bakersfield, and then which my great grandmother was there, but my great aunt lived in Madera, and so when we moved to Madera, then that's where I started getting introduced to the church. And I remember one time before we moved to Madeira, that I remember one time going into a Latter-day Saint church. I remember it distinctly. I even remember some of the things that went on in there, but it's very vague. It's as it. I remember that sequence of events, even though that I'd visited other churches. That one seems to stick out. I don't know why. You know what I mean? I can see it vividly in my mind, being in a room with the other children. You know, I don't remember the children, but I remember the room and I remember uh, the different things. And so anyway, so then, like I said, I'm 9 years old. I get baptized. So I'm living with my mom and dad, my great aunt, my great grandmother, and it's a very small, dilapidated house. Me, my great grandmother, and my brother, we all sleep in the same bed. It's like a full size bed. She weighs out about 280, 300 pounds, So there's not a lot of room, but she is a lot of comfort. Had
Yeah.
great stories, had great stories. She one of the things I told you about my great uncle who got killed with a 22. Uh thing about that was, and I'm gonna share the story because it'll fit in why some what is going on in my life. So
Yeah.
she was back in 32. Uh, her oldest boy was Marion, and again, our kinfolk are not only the notorious ones that I just talked about, but the Daltons too, which were a notorious gang back in the 1800s. And so, well, they were hanging out. The Daltons and my great uncle were hanging out, and he was 12 years old. But before that, a week before that, my great grandmother was laying on her bed, and it's a one-room house. The kitchen, everything's all connected, and she leans and she tells me this. She's told me this story umpteen times, just over and over. She loved this story, and I loved it too. But it was very hard. I'm sure it was very hard for her because she she'd have to remember her son being, killed by that 22. But she said that she was laying in the bed and she was reading, and then she laid over on the side of the side, and then on the side of her bed, on the side of the bed, she she called out to the family. She says, "Marion, I see you in your casket by my bed." And then a week later, he was shot. They had the oh Ma, you're crazy, kind of thing over there at the table. But yeah, she seen the casket that he was laying in a week before he got shot. That and she was wide awake. So her experience allows me to, and she had other experiences that are vague in my mind, but I remember that one very specifically. But that experience from her really helps me appreciate the kind of experiences I have. And so again, for me, like I said, because I'm so locked in on truth, truth is everything to me because, you know, I've experienced being a liar, and it's still, like I said, that one moment of my life really burns me. So
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like that feeling of 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 guilt, where so that I don't want that anymore. I lost a job, a really good job, because I refused to lie. Even my friends, and I was making over 100 a year. And my friend said, "Hey, you're not going to keep this job if you don't lie." I said, "This job's not worth it,"
Yeah.
and it's not. No job is worth it. So I refused to lie. And being honest with oneself is most important to me because because I during my time at that work, at that particular job, there was like 6 or 7 atheists that I turned to God because they knew I wouldn't lie. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if I'm not lying, And I'm not lying about, trying to stay out of trouble.
Mhm.
That means I'm not lying to you about about what I'm saying to you, well, my experiences or whatever. So you
Yeah.
got to live with that, you know. So they were, a lot of them, some of them I would change in matter of 30-minute conversation. Some of them took a little bit long, took weeks or whatever, just, once in a while going to them, whatever. I even had this one experience where I was this one guy told me about a month before. He said, I don't have nothing to do with religion, because he knew who I was. I'm like, whatever, and we had this conversation a little bit. And then I was and after church on Sunday, or excuse me, after work on Sunday, I would get in my white shirt and my pants to go to church so I could run to church. I'd even ride my bike to church sometimes from
Yeah.
work, which was only another 3 miles away from where my home was. But anyway, the guy says, what are you doing? Going to funeral? No, I'm going to church. I don't have nothing to do with church, all that, he repeated. And then a month after that, I had written a thing about the atonement and the sacrament specifically in that. And I was like, and so I handed this to a few people, and they all appreciated it. And then I went to him. I said, "Look, I got this thing I wrote. It's religious. It's spiritual. I'd like for you to have it so you can read it." And he said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And so I gave it to him.
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks after I gave it to him, I went back to him. I said, "Did you read it?" He said, "Yeah." Now I go to church again, and now that means a lot to me. And I even put it on the refrigerator door so that my son and my wife could read
Mhm.
it. He's Catholic, you
Mhm.
know, and that's a great thing, because I just want to, I just spoke plainly the truth, and it affected somebody in a deep way. And
Mhm.
there's all kinds of those experiences that go on. But I'm not looking for people to jump into the Church of Jesus Christ. I just want them to be more than satisfied where they're at
Mhm.
in a religious, in some kind of setting where you have an empowerment of others around you, so that you can continue to grow to Christ.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't, conversions and that's not my part. If somebody, I'm spoiled, I guess, because I know that all the unique things that I'm going to be talking about here are unique to me.
Mhm.
They're not yours, they're not anybody else's, they're mine. And God has given me those occasions in my life, because he knows I'm a loudmouth. I'll tell him
Yeah.
about every story that I have, because
Yeah.
it helps other people on their journey. And he knows I'll be, I think he give it to me, because he didn't give it to me when I was 12 years old to know. He waited till I'm 33 years old, when I've destroyed everybody's life around me, and then started giving me. Actually, I knew that, but there's a story about when I was 5 years old, I can tell. But I'm just saying, it wasn't until 33 years old, because I'd left the church, because uh, let me do this. I try not to jump around, but I do. So whenever we joined the church at 9, my mom and dad eventually divorced when I was 10. She left to go to Sacramento from where I live, which is 150 miles away. And there was no real connection between me and my mom, because everybody was talking mean about her, and she was in such a bad way, no matter what. It's just, it was abusive in the house. My dad was abusive, and an alcoholic at that. And so she's not responding very well. She's not trying to, but this is back in, the early 70s and stuff like that. So there's really not any support groups
Yeah.
out there for battered women,
Mhm.
and so because of that, I it's kind of like, she wasn't there, but my great grandmother was there. She was the the she was my protection, my wall between my dad and his abuse, if there was and there wasn't a lot of abuse towards me, but I know there's enough against my mom that it made the house really, kind of on edge once in a while. Not all the time. It was, look, I don't, as a child, I think grew up almost in a normal way. There's some bumps in there, but mostly. But again, my mom had left. I didn't really have that kind of attachment to her that I did with my dad and my great grandmother and my great uncle and a few other people. There was a real attachment to these people, and and so I uh, eventually my dad chased after my mom into Sacramento. My great grandmother was stuck watching us by herself, and she's 72 years old, I believe it. No, excuse me, uh, 78 years old by that time, or somewhere close to that. 78 years old. She was born in 1900. It was 1977, so she's 77 years old. But so she's going to have a hard time. So my great aunt went ahead and took me and my brother and we lived over there. And she's Latter-day Saint, and she's actually active in the church. And then we went actively because we had stopped going to church. We stopped just as soon as we were baptized. We stayed in it for a couple of months, and then we out, didn't really. But whenever I moved in with my great aunt about 11 years old, then we were fully active and we were going. And so when uh we went through, like I said, I received the priesthood at the age of 12, even though I didn't get my answer. I just said, okay, fine, I'll just do it anyway, because it's just, like I guess I wanted to fit in. But there was, in that but I wasn't faithful to the church. I was still taking drags of cigarettes. Had I don't think I hadn't drank another drink of beer since I was 11, so I was 12 years old. So I stopped that, and I didn't get drunk or anything, but I would, I'd sneak around and do that, just to get get a kick out of it for the occasion. It's like the smoking, and then I'd lie to my great aunt about where I was. Whenever I moved in with her, I'd lie to her and stuff like that. And I gotta make reconciliation with her when I get up there too. But she probably knew what I was going through. But then by the time I was 17 years old, pretty much everybody that was a, a key person in my youth that could keep me locked into the church had went to college or somewhere, and no, I'm left alone. And there was really nobody really strong. And a lot of the times the leadership in the church uh, wasn't too concerned about pornography at all. Some of
Yeah.
the music that I was even bringing into to the cultural hall was pretty vile, and I didn't realize it until you get old enough to realize the vileness of the music.
Yeah.
It was pornographic too. But and I'm like, oh, how shameful I was at that time. But again, I got next door neighbors. They watch pornography. My youth leaders, they're watching movies like Porky's and saying, "Oh, that was just high school things and all." I'm like, I watched it, so I thought, well, that's just I knew I knew it was something's wrong, but when you're that age, it's not wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
when you have other people around you, saying it's not wrong, that it's okay, it's kind of that eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die kind of, and then
Yeah.
God will only hit you with a few stripes. But it's not that way. And once you realize that that's not, that you were, way off target. And then but anyway, so again, from the age of 11, when I moved my great aunt, until I was 17, I was going actively, went to seminary, uh, until my last year of high school. I still went, but I wasn't engaged. Sometimes I'd be engaged, but most time I was out, you know, sleeping, or, meaning I wasn't, fully in. But And then we, like I said, at 17, I finally left. And then when I went to the military, I went because basic training, it's either be in the dorm or in the dorm for all day Sunday, or you go to church for a couple
Mhm.
hours. So I chose church, So again, there was, and I went back then, and then I went back one other time, and then I got involved with a woman, and then we weren't right with ourselves before we got married, and so we got married by the bishop inside of a just regular chapel on base. But then we went to church a couple of times, but we were out, didn't last long. And so by the and so we weren't a good we were most time everything's okay, but there was always those volatile times where I got into a pattern like my dad, but not to the abuse that he was engaged with, but it was still very abusive. It was
Mhm.
physical, it was a physical and a mental abuse on both sides, and it was just not the best of worlds. But you don't realize how bad things are until you find Christ. I'm sorry, you don't. You really you just think this is the norm. This feels okay. It's
Mhm.
like there's going to be some great moments in those battles that you're fighting, because there'll be those times that you get to escape the battle and actually, enjoy the life that you hope for. But again, it's never what you would it looking from the outside in, it was bad, no matter what it looked like. But anyway, so my wife at the time had some problems keeping the covenant. We weren't married in the temple, but she was unfaithful to me, and so there was she already had a child before we got married, and I accepted that child as my daughter. We love each other so much. Then me and my first wife, we had a child, and then I got tied up, and then she had two other children outside of outside of marriage, and I love all those children. I got 8 children, and because there's those four, and then my wife that I married, my second wife that I married after I divorced the first one. Don't get that confused with the polygamy thing. So, so she had 4 children, and I embraced them as my children too.
Yeah.
I got 8 children. I love them all, and and actually I adopted the younger two boys that didn't have a real person in their lives, and so, but I loved them so much, and they still live with me now. That's an interesting story for itself. But I've got all kinds of great stories. But anyway, so again, um, so my wife at the time was having a child, and it wasn't mine, and she knew that. All right, so now she wants to go back to church. But 2 years before that, it's kind of interesting. I was at my great aunt's house, and the bishop was there. They said, AJ, would you like to go back to church sometime? No, not until my wife wants to go.
Mhm.
I was like, okay. So that was about it. And
Mhm.
then, like I said, a couple of years later, my wife says, hey, I want to go back to church. And I was like, okay. And in my mind, I'm like, this is a failed experience.
Yeah.
You've already been there, done that before. So because but I don't know. This is where the story is a fog in a lot of ways. I don't know exactly what happened, but it did. It started to happen, and I started to engage. I started to get connected.
Mhm.
I started to affect people's lives with what I was involved in.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just that I was going to church, but I was listening to every TV evangelist, including Arnold Murray, which was probably one of my favorites. Probably my favorite of all of them is Arnold Murray from the Shepherd's Chapel. Uh, just a great teacher. I listened to Hank Hanegraaff. I would listen to all of them. That radio, TV. I was engaged all the time. But I also was listening, watching the BYU channel just came out. So I was watching a lot of their videos, their lectures and things like that. Uh, John, by the way, and I can't remember the other people, but I know he was. I remember him specifically. But just there's but several on there, and I loved it, and I was watching the old apostles when they were speaking in front of BYU or whatever. And so I was engaged, but I was engaged on all this stuff, and people at work were talking to me about, well, Joseph Smith, this doctrine here, this doctrine, polygamy, Mount Mel's massacre, all these different things, and so they were telling me Hank Hanegraaff is talking about the kingdom of the cults. A friend of mine gave me the Walter Martin tape that I listened to over and over and over again for months about his going about on LDS doctrine and how it's completely wrong, nature of God and things like that. So I was exposed to a lot of things, and but again, I'm looking for truth. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be satisfied on one thing except for truth. I don't care where it comes from. I just want truth. But then again, it's like I'll tell it this way because this is kind of important. I don't need need the Church of Jesus Christ. I could leave it today and not even think twice about it. I go because it's truth to me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I don't need it. I just go because I know it's truth to me, and that's important. So, and because I go to a Baptist Bible study every week, and I want to engage more, but my work schedule hasn't allowed me to do that. So all I'm doing is looking for truth all the time. I don't need, and so again, I don't need the church. I that's where the truth is for me, and I'm compelled to go because of that.
Mhm.
And so again, at my early stages of engaging in the process of discovery. So I'm listening to Hank Hennig, excuse me, Hank Hennig, but I'm listening to Walter Martin's dialogue, and he's talking about how Satan came to Eve. This is the first time that anybody introduced the idea that man could become gods, and and he would present this idea. And see, Satan only would tell you that you could become a god. So anybody that tells you that, any prophet that tells you, or anybody that calls themselves a prophet who says that you can become a god, is in line with Satan. And I'm like, and so I would study on the matter, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so and I was thinking, and so I was reading, and then I got there to I want to make sure that I get to it real quick here. Where and here it is in Genesis 3, 4, and 5, where it says, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die,
Mhm.
for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil.
Mhm.
And so again, that's a good argument. So when Satan is introducing this thing. And so then you go down a little bit farther in Genesis 3:22, and it says, and the Lord God said, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil.
Mhm.
Well, that just puts, that unfolds the idea that God recognizes us and our capacity to become like them. Even and whenever I think of word like them, it means that become gods like them. That's the only that's the way I would interpret that. I don't I'm plain about the way I read things. I tried not to read into things. I just let it plainly speak to me.
Mhm.
And so again, so they kind of says, okay, Walter Martin, this didn't work. You know what I mean? That kind of, because obviously God has even recognized us because of the knowledge that we are receiving. We are becoming like them more and more because of that.
Mhm.
So I can understand that. I can understand, but and then is again, I was engaged with people online through email, and one of those experiences I had, I was engaged with a person here with on tithing. He said, "Well, Joe Smith just created tithing because it was a way for him to gain money from the people, but there obviously he was not a prophet of God, so you can't so obviously he just did it for his own advantage. So that's the only reason he's doing that. And so I'm looking for the scripture real quick here, if I put it in order. Um anyway, let me get to it real quick here. And you go to Acts. So one night, uh being involved in this conversation, back and forth, I knew that the principle was true because of the teachings that we know they're in the Bible as far as Malachi. You appreciate even though that the Old Testament is for the say that people would say that the laws are fulfilled in the Old Testament. That doesn't it still Malachi still reads this idea of if you pay if you're don't be a robber of God. If you pay your full tithe, the windows of heaven will be opened up to you. So there's a blessing still that is connected to tithing. You know what I mean? If you honestly pay your tithing, there's a blessing. Even though that the condemnation might be, and I'm realizing this as I'm talking to you, even though that the condemnation that would come for ones that did not pay a tithe, because we can see that in Romans, and when it says those who know the law, who obey the law, will be blessed by the law, basically. So even though that Jesus Christ's atonement allows a person to not to inherit his kingdom and the blessings of that kingdom, those who are still faithful in the covenant and still pay their tithes will receive the blessings afforded to those who do, because that's what Romans would say is those who know the law are blessed by the law and will receive the blessings of the based on the law, and those who do not know the law but do not keep the law will not be condemned by the law. So anyway, so what I'm saying, but anyway, so I'm in this so I'm in this like block where I'm kind of like, this guy is rattling my cage. I know that principle is true, but I don't know it here. It's not here. I'm not, I can't answer the question to validate it to myself, whether he believes it or not. And at the time, I was probably more eager to get him to be convinced than myself in a ways, because when you're young in the gospel, or young in your your conversion story, you're eager for one, but also you're trying to build a wall around you to create a large enough wall so that the things that would tear you down are 3 or 4 layers out, because you have enough people around you that you've created that wall. So I'm trying to create a wall around me, and as fast and big as I can. But again, now I just say, I don't need the wall. I'm good. But anyway, so this guy rattled my cage, and So I after work, the place that I worked at, it was separated from the factory. I've worked maintenance most of my time that I've been working in my life, except for in the Air Force. But so I was in a different building, and I had an empty room. Then I'd go in there and pray every night. And so whenever I was so I went in there and prayed, and it didn't. I just prayed about general things, and then I don't know if I was praying specifically to find the answer, but all I know is Acts chapter 5 came in here. I was like, then I was like, took finished my prayer, wrote it on the back of my hand because I don't know what Acts chapter 5 says. I'm just getting started. This is way back, back 27 years old almost. And then it reads like this: but a certain man named Ananias, and with Sapphira, with his wife, sold a possession and kept back part of the price, his wife also being privy to it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why hath Satan filled thine heart to lie to the Holy Ghost, and to keep back part of the price of the land? Whiles it remained, was it not thine own? And after it was sold, was it not in thine own power? Why hast thou conceived this in thine heart? Thou hast lied unto men, but unto God. Not lied unto men, but unto God. And then he dies, and then his wife dies. So I'm reading this, I'm like, well, when you make a promise, you better keep it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so also this has to do with money and that offering that they were supposed to give. And here they die at his feet because they lied about, about their offering and what the amount was. So I took it, again, I'm not looking, I would say that by this time I'm starting to defend, at least really engaged in defending the church. Even though I'm listening to everything else that's going on, all the other religions out there, I'm still starting to see the pattern that there's something, in this. And there's probably an experience or something like that that happens before this comes up, and I think it does. Actually, it was kind of funny. One of the experience, I think it comes before this here, this event here is my friend that was a huge anti-Mormon worked with me, and we had and where I worked, we had benches that were 4x8, and so he was coming through, and I was working at the bench, and he stops, and on the other side of the bench, about 4 feet away, and he starts to say, well, that Joseph Smith was a con man, and um, he just created the church to gain power and power over the people and power over women and stuff like that. And not exactly those words, but again, the polygamy and stuff like that. He's talking about his uh, influencing the people around him to do whatever he wanted. And so and I heard him, and I spoke back to him, and it was like a roaring lion with a very solid, like impactful tone. I said, there's nothing you or anybody can say to me that would ever make me deny Joseph Smith as a prophet of God.
Hmm.
And I said it with such power that he just walked away. Now, for me, I'm like, what? It was a whole new experience.
Mhm.
I had there was no, what would you say? And I said it so articulated, so great.
Mhm.
It's just the magic of the words. but I don't know where those words come from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not something that I would, again, I speak well, but most time my wife says, I don't understand a word you're saying most of the time, but and I'm just saying, but those words came out and they were so powerful. Not only the overwhelming to him because he didn't want to talk to me about religion anymore, but I convinced him a couple of weeks later to engage again, that everything was cool, and but I felt bad for the way that took place, but not bad, felt bad the way that it affected him mostly, but it affected me great. So now, I mean, after that moment, what could I, can I walk back from that? That's kind of like, that's kind of hard to walk away from, because again, because of the moment, it wasn't it wasn't something that I would have articulated so well. You know what I mean? It just
Mhm.
came from nowhere, and it came with such force and such fire, vibrancy and fire. And I was like, wow. But anyway, so by this time, so when this guy's challenging me about tithing, I knew the principle was true, and I knew this moment happened, So I'm saying, okay, well, this is the answer. And so, we didn't stay in the conversation too much longer after that. But so I side with the idea that tithing is a principle and a covenant that I made with God. Therefore, I'm going to fulfill that covenant. So anyway, so that was one experience. And then so kind of that first moment really kind of helped me solidify the which way I was going. But that doesn't mean I wasn't engaged with other people and listening to everybody else,
Mhm.
and even going and listening to everything on the radio and on TV. And then Arnold Murray, I love Arnold Murray, but again, I only read things for truth. I don't read things to follow a narrative, only for truth. And so he gets now he would read the Bible verse by verse through his, and you've watched Arnold Murray, I imagine, or you kind of should. Okay, so every day he would get there on TV for an hour and he would read the Bible from Genesis to Revelations all the way through.
Hmm.
Each day taking a section that he would read. So he gets to Ezekiel 37, um, 16 through 22. Again, I read things plainly. I don't read them. I'm not looking for narratives. I'm not trying to uh, find find a path where it fits in my idea, but I'm just looking at it plainly. At least I hope I'm honest with that. All we can do is hope that we're honest with that endeavor. We never really know it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We're never 100% knowing if we're really honest with it. Only God can really know our hearts. We don't even know sometimes our own hearts on how that plays out, because again, there's a lot of things that are there that would affect your mind, and it's hard not to try to. And I don't want to listen to professors. I don't want to listen to theologians. I mean, I'd listen to it, but I'm just saying, I don't want them to dictate to me how it's affecting my mind and my heart whenever I read it. So he goes to 37, 16 through 22. Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and
You
write
said
upon
it
it.
was real quick. You said it was Ezekiel 13,
No, Ezekiel 37, 16 through 22.
37.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Moreover,
Ze-
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm kind of slow on the references. Ezekiel 37,
Yeah, 16 through 22.
16. All right, we're there now.
All right, very good. Says, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companion. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel and his companions, and join them one to another into one stick. and they shall become one in thine hand. And then when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou not show us what thou meanest by these? Say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, and his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. And the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon mountains of Israel. And one king shall be their king to them all. And they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. So again, his explanation is this is just two nations coming together. This has nothing to do with writing. He for me, when he what would you say in his explanation, when you completely dismiss keywords in the description of that, then you are forming a pattern to fit a narrative that is locked in, that you have to settle into. And that's what I've seen of this. I like this guy. This is the dishonest reading of this passage. Not that I didn't appreciate everything else that he was. You don't throw his phrase too was you don't throw out the baby with the dirty bathwater. You separate the two. But I'm just saying, I want people to be honest with me, and I'm going to read it, and this is the way it affected my mind. Of course, it ties to the Book of Mormon, but of course, I would read it that way based on that idea, but also I read it in the plain and simple idea that two groups are writing, and the word stick in here also could be plank. I looked that up recently, so I didn't know that then, but I looked it up recently. In the original Hebrew, it could be stick or it could be plank, which would be something they could write. They wrote on at that time too. So it could be, either way. But I'm just saying, it formed in my mind that there's supposed to be two books. They're supposed to come together and be one. And that's the way I read it. And then that says, well, where's that other book? And there's only one book that really makes that claim. It's a Book of Mormon, is being that of the house of Ephraim, or actually the house of Manasseh, Joseph, and then Ephraim is part of that group too, with anyway, Lehi, and then the other group was Zedekiah's son that was lost, even though that all of his sons were murdered. There's a story that that one son was still in the womb and actually was born after that in a different place. And he's Mulekite is his name. So that there's a story, there's something like that running around. But Mulek ends up in the Book of Mormon too, and he's of the house of Ephraim. And then Ephraim, excuse me, when Lehi came over, Ishmael was a friend of his that came with him, and he's of the tribe of Ephraim, and Lehi is a tribe of Lehi, or excuse me, tribe of Manasseh. So anyway, so again, so interpretation that I got from this was that this is another book, and then so that I and there's I mean, in the beginning, and that's again, that was just a couple of things, that started to form in my head. I was also listening to oh, I'm gonna forget his name every time I think about him, I forget his name, but he made a he going all over California, all over the world, or all over California mostly, and he was he had a story, a great conversion story of his own. He was in World War II and all that, but it was the evidence of the 17 evidences of the true church. And for the life of me, I still can't remember his name, but I'll get it there. I'll come up. But anyway, so again, him and his four friends, one of them was a genius where he had a photographic memory, and he was Catholic. And so they went to see Einstein at Princeton, who was giving a lecture one time.
Floyd
And
Weston. Is it
it's
Floyd Weston?
yes. See, Floyd Weston. That's the one. Thank you. I'm glad you got to it. But anyway, so he's got four friends, and one of them is genius, uh, photographic memory, and the guy with the photographic memory. They all go to this lecture, and Floyd Weston says, "Well, he's the only one that can actually understand what Einstein was saying. The others really do." But there was something that Einstein said that made this genius man go back to the dorm and say, "Hey, in this book, the Bible, that is, there is evidences of the true church, and I'm going to go through it painstakingly until I come up with everything that is, and so it covers, everything from A to Z, as in his, Floyd Webster's, there's nothing on that list that did not describe the Church of Jesus Christ. Eventually, after they find it, all of them find it. But it's a great story, but you know what I'm saying? But I'd listen to that, and there's other things I'd listen to. But the point, but I never stopped listening to the other stuff. But this was becoming more and more of the things that I was gravitating towards. But eventually, you know, um, well, there's again, I've had so many experiences that are really hard. It's one thing to have one experience. See, I haven't even got to the Book of Mormon where the Spirit had told me that the Book of Mormon is true. I ain't got that yet. I don't get that until like 4 or 5 years ago. And I've been in the church for 27 years, or been back for almost now 27 years or so now, or 25, whatever that looks like. I get a little bit. Yeah, I should have wrote it in journal, but I didn't. But anyway, so I'm just saying that not only did that one experience doesn't lock you in on nothing. And then I'll tell you another experience, real quick. Try to. So I was in between jobs. My great uncle, another great uncle of mine, who married my great aunt, who was raising me after we moved in with her. So my great aunt married somebody, and now him and her are basically raising us as my brother and me. But anyway, so at like I said, this is back 30, or back when I was 34, whatever that looked like. No, actually, it's way before that. Yeah, it's somewhere around. Let's see, this is 24, isn't it? So it's a ways back, but it's early in my pursuit of knowing truth. You know what I mean? It's early in my conversion to the gospel. So anyway, so me and him were working together because I was in between jobs. He had a little shop, and I had talked to him about taking on and just like becoming a part of this shop that he's got. And then and he liked it. He loved the idea. And then I got a call for a job, and it was a great opportunity. And I just took the job, and when I told him what happened, he got mad, and then he dismissed me, and we didn't talk for a year or so. And but the next time I heard from him, he called me up and says, AJ, I need your help. Because I thought he had stopped working on tractors and disc, for farming, small stuff. He's 80 something, he's 80 years old at least, got some problems, health problems. But he called me up and says, hey AJ, I'd like to see if you could help me. And I'd like for you to come over and talk to me about it. And I said, yeah, sure. And so I went over there, and so we're talking to each other, and he's telling me about, we're going to go out to Fairmead, which is north of town a little bit, out in the middle of nowhere, basically. And we're going to pick up a tractor and disc, and we're going to load it up on the trailer, and so I can work on it and stuff like that. And so we got through that all right. And then I said, yeah, no problem. Just let me know. And and then we started talking about spiritual things. He was baptized in the church when he got married to my great aunt, but he soon became inactive after about 6 months. And so this man hadn't been to church since I was 12 years old, basically, and I'm 34 years old by then, or somewhere around there. And so here we are talking about spiritual things. And I hear a man across from me at the table profusely sobbing and telling me how much he knew the church was true. And the reason he didn't go is because he was so embarrassed by how much he cried while he was at church. So I was like, what? You know what I mean? In my mind, I'm like, awed by this moment, because I'd never heard this from him. We never talked about the church at all, but when we brought it up, sure enough, this man was like incredibly emotional about his knowledge that the church was true. And then so a week later, we go out and go get tractor and disc. And he was on the tractor with a disc, and the tractor was running rough, and he gunned it as best he could. And he got up, and the wheel got off on the side of the tractor, off the side of the trailer. And then he stood up and sat down and popped the clutch and went over on him. So I was out there watching that. Nothing I could do about it. He died right there in front of me. And this man's last testimony to me is pretty locked in. You know what I mean? This man, to me, he gave his life for me, because he expressed himself in that one moment that we had about spiritual things. And then a week later, he's passed. And the crazy thing was, I knew that was the way he was going to go. When I get impressions, and for a long time before that, a couple of years, whatever, I imagined that this is the way he was going to die. Crazy stuff. Yeah. So, and that's the way he died. So anyway, so that was an occasion. I mean, that's pretty hard to dismiss. But let me give you another experience. Not only, I want to emphasize, it's not only just the experiences that I'm having, but it's also the doctrine that I'm learning too at the same time. They're both going together. So I'm going to lighten it up just for a moment. There's and I didn't find it first, but I believe there was an occasion where I was reading Peter's words on let's see. Oh, there it is. Reading Peter 3:18.
First or second?
1 Peter
3:18.
Got
it.
Or I don't know why it says 3:18. It should be 3:8. Try 3:8. I think that's what it is. Let me make sure I get it right, because I don't want people to think that I'm yep, no, maybe it is 18. There it is. It is 18. Okay, number 18. It says, what I did whenever I was whenever I was copying and pasting, I missed the one. So, so what it says, for Christ also hath once suffered for sin, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. And when I read that, this is way before I started even thinking about reading the Doctrine and Covenants. All right.
Mhm.
So I read that, and all of a sudden, in my mind, this thing exploded about what that meant. And it taught me that if you live a celestial law, you'll receive a celestial body. If you live a terrestrial law, you'll receive a terrestrial body. And if you live a telestial law, then you'll receive a telestial body. I was like, and some of the things that went on were in line with how if looking at a light bulb, if you the greater amount of electrons you can pass across a coil in an incandescent light bulb, the greater the light that it produces.
Mhm.
I was like, you're crazy. To think about resurrection in that way, this idea that it just didn't, what I'm saying, this is not, like, wow, you know what I mean? I'm like, now I'm really going nuts kind of thing. I'm thinking like, yeah, this is not, whatever. I don't find this credible at the time. I like the idea, but I'm still like, yeah, whatever, because I want to make sure that I'm listening to the right voice. I want to make sure I'm listening to the Holy Spirit when I'm receiving. So anyway, a few months later, I was challenged by another person from a different conversation about the 88th section of the Doctrine and Covenants. I think it's 92nd verse or whatever, but I don't know. But what was important is I read that verse that he said this was false doctrine. And then I said, well, let me go back to the beginning of it. And it's in Doctrine and Covenants 88, 22 through 24. And it reads there, for he who is not able to abide the law of the celestial kingdom cannot abide a celestial glory. And he who cannot abide the law of a terrestrial kingdom cannot abide a terrestrial glory. And he who cannot abide the law of a telestial kingdom cannot abide a celestial glory. Now, the way it was given to me, if you live a celestial law, you receive a celestial glory. Even though this is just saying it if you can't, but if you can, I was like, that's validation right there.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's validation from what I received months before that when I was reading the Bible, and here Joseph Smith said those words in plainness that there's no way that they can't cross over. So anyway, so that's so now I'm validated about tithing. I'm validated about the resurrection, and now the process there. Kind of hard to step away from that stuff. And remember, this is the prophet, or what we would call the prophet Joseph Smith. So if for me, I'm looking at it, if Peter says it, the apostle, and then you have Joseph Smith expounding on that, but I'm receiving this while I'm reading the Bible, these ideas, and then it's elaborated by Joseph Smith in the same way, and I hadn't read Joseph Smith's writings, then it's kind of hard not to put the two together and say, this is, if God wrote the Bible and he inspired Peter to write these words, knowing how it would affect me, God knew how it would affect my mind
Mhm.
and what would happen in that moment. And then he ties it to Joseph Smith. So anyway, so it's kind of
How are you getting any sort of kingdom living out of First Peter 3:18? I
not.
think
That's the crazy thing. It was just the quickening of the spirit that, again, I'm reading them words, quickening of the spirit. Then all of a sudden this stuff starts blowing up in my mind that I'm thinking that is weird and out of touch with reality. If you
okay.
go, but and this thing about if you live a celestial law, you receive a celestial body. That was something that was influenced in my head. Outside. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't come from the scriptures now, does it? It
Okay.
doesn't come from the
Okay.
Bible. This stuff just poured in. You know
Okay.
what I mean?
Because earlier we were talking about I thought we were saying that you wanted to see it in the scripture. That's why you had an issue with the Ezekiel passage and the Genesis passage.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I
But
understand that.
now, but now this is more supernatural.
Yeah, I would say it's more supernatural because, again, like I said, I read Quickening of the Spirit there, and I'm like, and this scene blows up in my head. I'm like, this is, and I know it's not in the Bible. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I know that it's not there, but I know that in the LDS Church we believe the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial, but I have no idea how that's laid out in the scripture or in the Doctrine and Covenants. Have no idea. I just know it's there. You know what I mean? Or
Okay.
it's in the Bible where we see a celestial glory and a terrestrial glory, and then you have the three glories of heaven and all that kind of stuff, but you don't have a telestial. But I'm just saying, obviously in this scripture here, this one that was talking about this quickening of the spirit, there's no relevance to what I was locking in or what was poured onto me at that
Yeah.
moment. And then whenever I see it in the Doctrine and Covenants, like, oh wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Crazy, so I can only say, but like I said, God knew my heart, knew my mind, and how it would affect my mind. And then he allows me to continue on this path where I discover it in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Mhm.
Just the plainness of what I believe. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
not going to say that that revelation was given to me. He can tell me when I get it before him, he can say, hey, that wasn't mine, or that was mine. You know what I mean? And he
Mhm.
can explain to me how that worked. But he knew exactly how it would affect my mind
Yeah.
and put people in place so that I would go and discover this. I don't think there's any coincidences. I
Yeah.
think God patterns our lives. Those who are seeking after him, he does the little things in life to course us to his to affect us in the best way possible. You know what I mean? So anyway, again, so this was another occasion. So that, an experience like the one with the Acts chapter 5 event where I'm told to go read that, put it on the back of my hand, and because I don't know what the Bible says. I'm still learning, So whatever, so I don't know, whatever. But anyway, so the next spiritual event, and always everything that's happened to me spiritually connects back to an actual event that takes place, prophetic in its nature, to say the
Mhm.
least, somewhere there. And so the next event was every day while I was still with my first wife, I would come home and watch the BYU channel. Uh, and so just like every other day, I came home, sat there, and there everybody's walking around. It's in the living room, and I'm watching the BYU channel, and this lady, this is on a Monday. This lady is giving a lecture, and she mentions she quotes the verse, "The field is white and ready for harvest." It's out of the Doctrine and Covenants. And all of a sudden, this just whatever it was. I'm just saying it laid inside of me. It absolutely just terrified the living daylights out of me. But it was so warm and wonderful. I didn't want it to leave. And it was making me just sob profusely. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? I've never had this kind of experience before in my life. Not like this one. This was like unknown to me at all. And also, just this woman just quoting this verse didn't, I'd heard that verse sporadically whenever I was a kid. It never, I've heard it after, it never happened. That same experience never happened. It's never, that one moment never has reproduced itself in that way for that verse. All right. So anyway, so that was on Monday, and I didn't mention anything about that experience to anybody. But my wife, who was actually, we needed her income watching children to help supplement whatever we needed, and so she told me either that night or Tuesday that there was a woman and a granddaughter coming over to on Wednesday so that we could meet with them, and so so that it would this little interview so that my wife could watch the child for an income. And so I said, okay. But my brother was getting married in the temple at that time, that day. Now I'm not temple worthy at the time, but I wanted to go meet my brother whenever so I could take pictures with him and all that. But anyway, this lady and her granddaughter came over on Wednesday, and they happened to be black. And so we're sitting there, John, having a great time about things, and religion hasn't really came up. The only thing we talked about is if the idea that we might be watching her on a Sunday, and we just said, hey, we go to church. We never said what church. We just said we go to church, and then if if you don't mind, we'd like to take her with us. She says, yeah, I'd love that. She doesn't know what church we're going to, and we don't know anything, And then eventually it gets close to where we have to start getting ready to get out the door to go meet my brother. And I said, well, it's getting time. We're going to go meet my brother at the temple after his wedding. And she says, you're Mormon. Now, this back before I understood the language between Mormon and Latter-day Saint. But she says, you're Mormon. I said, yeah. She says, I'm a Mormon too, but I haven't been to church for 13 years, and I've been looking for a way to get back in.
Huh.
And she and so and we're like, oh great, yeah, with that kind of conversation. And then sure enough, she comes back to church. Eventually she becomes endowed, goes through the temple and everything for the first time. Her granddaughter is baptized into church. She brings, I don't know, at least in the teens of the people that she brings and is baptized into the church. So the field was right and ready for harvest through that one experience. Crazy stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I couldn't, you can't invent this stuff. You know what I mean? So again, we're attaching this idea that the Lord had, at least my impression. Like I said, I have to talk real. You know what I mean? I don't want to overemphasize or underemphasize anything, but I want to talk real, what I understand. For me, the Holy Spirit confessed to me that there was people that were coming into my life and I didn't interpret it until the event takes place.
Yeah.
Later on, I don't know what the attachment is from this experience to the one, even after we talked about the temple and everything. She's Mormon, all. I didn't really associate the two, but as things started to mature, then I was like, oh, that's what that is. You know what I mean? So again, I have to say that if the Holy Spirit came to me and confessed to me this thing that was going to happen in my life, why would he do that if this church wasn't the right church? You know what I mean? So that's the way I interpret that. And like I said, but I'm more mature now. I know that the church is not for everybody, so I leave it to themselves. And that's why I don't proselyte. Unless the Lord gives me commandment in that way or something like that, I say, let people be, let them be happy for wherever they're at. Let God be the one who is the converter, not me. I just want to influence people's lives in the best way. But anyway, so there was that one, and so then the question of the nature of God came up because I read the Book of Mormon. Uh, uh, whenever I dream prophetically, something tragic happens in my life, and sure enough, I had this prophetic dream, and when the dream event took place that was in the dream, then basically, yeah, so basically that same day I left my first wife, which that's never good,
Yeah.
never an easy transition, but it happened that way. Um, so anyway, so I left my first wife. I'm in a camper, pretty much homeless, living out on my great aunt's property, uh, where my dad lives in the house, which is now really deteriorated. Same one that I was living in when I was a kid, when I moved to Madera. Anyway, so I'm out there in and I was reading the Book of Mormon a lot, but now I'm getting this. It's hard for me to not just empathize with Christians theology because there is a lot of things in the Bible that point to the triune God or the singular God or whatever that looked like. And now I'm confused because even the Book of Mormon and different places in theology that we have points to a singular God. And so now I'm like, you listen to Walter Martin enough, and you listen to these other people about the nature of God, and you listen to Isaiah writings and things like that, and you're like, yeah, it's absolutely there. There's
Mhm.
there's no there's no denying that it's there. But there's other things in the scripture that also are not crossing over so well. Honest, just being honest with myself. That's all
Yeah.
I care about.
When
Being
when you say crossover, do you mean internally through the Bible or
Yeah,
from the
that's
Bible
what
to the
with
Book of
all of it,
Mormon?
but internally with the Bible, it doesn't cross
Okay.
over unless you understand it fully.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. I think
Only God knows it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
We
at
we
face
we
value, there's plenty of stuff that sounds weird, but
yeah. So
under further investigation, I think
it crosses over absolutely.
yeah, you can harmonize it.
Yeah, you can, but again, it's not to harmonize it to a narrative that somebody else has created.
Yeah.
It has remember, I don't function where somebody else is converting me to an idea. My conversion has to be where I'm engaged, where I'm because and I'll bring it up later, but we're talking about the eternal marriage, and then I'm explaining this the normal dialogue that Latter-day Saints give for why Matthew 20, 20, 32 or 30, 22, 22, 30, wherever that is, where it says there no marriage or marrying in the resurrection. So I
Yeah.
give them the normal everyday answer, and I'm like, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, but I wasn't satisfied. So I wasn't satisfied. I wouldn't be satisfied for somebody trying to teach me a theology, right or wrong. I don't care, but I have to be able to embrace it myself. There's have to be something that forms within me without somebody's uh, uh, trying to. They can give me suggestions. They can give me some ideas on how they feel about it, or give me their theology. And I was listening to all of it, but really doesn't matter. It still has to come full circle with me until I can understand it fully. But anyway, so I hammered on that for months. It's like I prayed about it. I read about it. I did everything. I wrote about it, just everything. And then one day, because and I didn't understand this then, but the theology within Christianity is God is not a not tangible in its existence. It's meaning that in the normal things, he's not electrons, protons, and neutrons. He is not
Okay.
that way. You understand what I'm saying? He
Yeah.
doesn't have that. Okay. But see, I don't know that about Christianity. I just know that they have this God that is not physical, meaning
Yeah.
that's not like Jesus Christ, who's a man, who's an immortal man. So they don't have that. That's all I know. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And then they do different things, and I understand. You know, like I said, but I was confused by that. But anyway, I was confused by everything. But anyway, I was hammering this about for a few months or whatever that be. And then I was working on a piece of equipment. I was laying down, and all of a sudden, in my mind, it was expressed this way: all things are one. The universe is one whole. God is one whole. And I was like, oh, that's it.
Mm.
That was the answer. But like I said, other people would refute that idea still, because again, it's a non-tangible being that created all things, Jesus Christ being the first incarnate of that which exists, but cannot be physically described in any way, or has no physical presence.
Mhm.
It's kind of confusing. But I don't know, don't know that when I was going through this. Some of the things that now that I've come up with that idea, some of the things that generated in the last 5 years is this is kind of interesting. We go to John chapter 5, verse 20 and 21. I'll let you get there if you want to follow along. Actually, I can share the screen if you wanted.
Sure.
Yeah,
Either
I'll
way.
do that. I'll do that. That way, not that one, not that one. There we go. So you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So so John 5, 20, 21. For the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth. And he will show him greater works than these, that he may marvel. For as the Father raiseth up the dead, and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. Now I just discovered this verse about within the last year. And the way that reads to me, connects to me, is especially 21, where it says, for as the Father raiseth up the dead and quickeneth them, past tense, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will, future tense. So yeah, past tense where the Father has done this work, and then the future, which is Jesus Christ. Now I just discovered that in the last year. Another thing, so then, just to wrap your head around some of the things that convinces me that the Church of Jesus Christ at least is on the right path, at least on the right trajectory when it comes to doctrine about the nature of God. I include this. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the word God there is Elohim, could be a plural pronoun. And then you have heaven, which could be sky water, which is the atmosphere. And then you have to understand these numbers to fully understand what's in my head. Doesn't matter, everybody has something that's in their head that influences their understanding about the nature of God. And so in my mind, it says, and this is off of Google search, says the universe is 93 billion light years across. 1 light year is 6 trillion miles. So it's pretty big. There's an estimated 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, the known universe, basically. The exact number of planets in the galaxy is unknown, but astronomers have made some estimated based on observation calculations. One way to estimate the number of planets is to multiply the number of stars by the average number of planets per star. And there's for some reason I didn't catch it, but there's couple of trillion in each galaxy. Then you have 300. Then they say that there's potentially 300 million habitable planets in the universe. Oh, excuse me, in the galaxy. And then you go multiply the galaxy 300 million by a couple of trillion galaxies. The numbers are pretty incredible. And so you put all that stuff together, and then you say, okay, with all that mass out there, the habitable mass that's out there, we're the only ones. That doesn't cross over in my mind. And then in my learning, this would come about is again, Genesis 1:26 and 27, it said, and God said, let us make man in our image after our own likeness. And I won't read the whole thing, but then there's something curious here that I did catch a few years ago. So God created man in his own image. In his own image, God created him, male and female. What seems to be going along there is in the beginning was the word was God, and the word was with God. And here you have, and God said, let us make man. So God created man. So here you have potentially the Father instructing the Son on the creation process. And Jesus Christ, actually, the word becoming flesh, and then that all things were created by the word. So that seems to tie into at least God the Father and the Son. So and the Holy Spirit is something that comes in the New Testament mostly, but he's mentioned in the Old Testament at times. But anyway, so it's kind of one of those things that I'm kind of focused. Something I discovered just about 7 years ago. This is the book of this is Genesis 5:1-3. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name, kind of interesting, their, plural, Adam, their name Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. So again, it ties back to Genesis 1, where it talks about the image and likeness. So it kind of, for me, it says this is how we can know a little bit more what God is talking about. Because if God is Jesus Christ, and the Lord comes to Abraham in the form of a man, then he becomes man through Mary, through that process of Mary. So the image that we have, it has to be after the image that eventually becomes Jesus Christ, or is the image of the human the human form that the Spirit is in, that we see in Abraham. So it's kind of complex in a way, but I think that has it ties together pretty good. So again, we're so I'm looking through all these things that I just want to make sure I don't skip anything real quick. So anyway, so that's just another experience. And then, you know, eventually I married my second wife, and a year after I had got married, my dad died. It was less than a year, actually. It was January 2nd, I believe, somewhere around there. We were in Sacramento, and we got the call that my dad had passed away. Another curious thing, I knew where he was going to die, and I know who was going to find him. And it happened just like that.
Mhm.
Killer. I mean, not killer, but crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want these thoughts in your head. It's a burden.
Mhm.
It's not a good thing. It's a burden when you have these thoughts in your head, because you feel like you're wishing somebody would die. And that's not what that's I would fight that so hard. You know what I mean? I just fought it, you know, didn't like it at all. But anyway, I can only imagine what my great grandmother felt like whenever she was in that mode. But anyway, later on, about 14 years or 13 years after he had passed away, I was uh I was dreaming one night, and and in this dream, whenever I dream about my ancestors, I always dream like we're in close proximity. I can see them, they can see me. We're kind of conversing, but not really, and just that kind of, it's just a dream, you know what I mean? But in this dream, what was going on in this dream, I was driving a bus, and I was going on an off ramp, and I had my soccer team in the back of the bus. I was coaching soccer, and went off into the embankment because the steering wheel come off in my dream. And so I'm down there working on the steering on this thing, and all of a sudden I hear my dad's voice say, "What you doing?" "Oh, nothing, just working on the bus, trying." He said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Dad, did you need something?" Because all the time in our dialogue, that's the way it would go. When he needed something, I always knew that was the pattern. He said, "What you doing?" "Oh, nothing, just working on a bus." He said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Dad, did you need something?" "Yeah, I could use your help." Now I don't see him, I only hear him, weird. But I said, and he said, "Yeah, I could use your help." And I said, "Well, I can come over now." He said, "No, just whenever you get, when you get time." I said, "Okay." So the dream ended. And I was like, that was on Sunday. And I woke up that morning, and I expressed to my wife and child, I said, "This is what happened. This is the dream." And I feel like that was my dad asking for us to do his work. See, my four original children, the three boys, I wanted one of them to stand in his place because they knew him. My youngest boy didn't know him at all. He was like less than a year old when he met him. So, but that was all I had left. You know what I mean? He's the last one in the house. He's the only one that could stand in. But anyway, but like I said, I was waiting for, and I didn't think my dad, because my dad was you know, was a great man. I loved him. Had all kinds of great attributes, but he just had some very critical problems that he was fighting against too. But I figured the conversations I had with him, there's no way that even in that life that he's worried about getting baptized. You know what I mean? It just didn't seem. It'd be like, uh, you know, it just didn't seem like it was an urgency to me. But I really, but that other part, was I wanted one of the older boys to get in to the water for him, but it never happened that way. But that dream comes up, and I tell my wife and child. My child is about 14 years at that time, the youngest one out of 8, and all the rest of them are moved out. And so, and I said, I'm 95% sure that was my dad asking us for help. And so we talked about it, and kind of a neat experience. And then, but I wasn't totally convinced, you know what I mean? Because we have dreams all the time. And so I have dreams all the time. So this could be just an abnormal dream, but it could be just a dream in itself. But you know, but still, I thought that was the appropriate path. Then on Wednesday, I wasn't dreaming. I was dead asleep. It was 4:55 a.m. My alarm goes off at 5:20, and this voice wakes me up. Like I said, I wasn't dreaming at all. Dead asleep. The voice wakes me up and says, read Isaiah 56. And I fumbled through my mind as I'm jolted in that way, trying to still wake up. And I went, Isaiah 56, Isaiah 58, no, 56. That's what he said. So I go and read Isaiah 56. And in the first part of that is talking about the Sabbath, but it's on the screen right now. Isaiah 56, 4-7 says, "For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep the Sabbath, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant. Even unto them will I give in mine house, and within my walls, a place and a name better than of the sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the strangers that join themselves to the Lord, to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, he to be his servants, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenants, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar, for mine house shall be called the house of prayer for all people." So again, the occasion that happened with the first dream and this awakening that I got here, I'm like, hey, we got to go do this for my dad. This is plainly speaking the language of the temple. You know what I mean? Because it talks about sacrifices and all that. So where do you do your sacrifices in the Old Testament? But in the temple. So I said, we got to go do this. My wife says, soccer, soccer, soccer. Remember, I got the soccer team in the back of the bus in the dream.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the temple that day because I had time. But I was coaching, my boys playing on my team, and we got soccer, you know. And sure enough, it took us almost a month to get to the temple because of soccer. I'm sorry, you couldn't play that out for nothing. You couldn't invent a story like that to hold that, you know. It's just, like I said, so another experience that says, validates the temple. Now, something very important. I lived a disastrous life up to the time that I was converted to Jesus Christ and his loving grace. But it always, now I'm about 52 at the time that this experience happens. I believe that's how old I was. For all that time between the time that I was 33 years old or so, up to the age of that moment, I never felt worthy to be in his holy place, the temple. I never felt worthy to take the sacrament. I felt dirty because I'd hurt a lot of people. I don't know if I reconciled enough in order for me to be in the presence of my God. And and it was a burden on me. Now I still went to the temple because I trusted the atonement. I still received the sacrament because I trusted the atonement. I still did all the things I was supposed to do because I trusted the atonement. But again, I felt ashamed of myself too at the same time. I couldn't relieve that burden. But whenever I got this here, he was saying to me, I love you. Come and be with me. Come to my house. You're worthy to be in my house, in my presence. Huge.
Mhm.
It's huge. Because again, we want to feel that we belong. We want to feel like that we belong in his presence. And when you live a disastrous life that I did for that conversion, it works on you,
Mhm.
works hard. But he gave me that peace and that joy that comes with that, with being presented with that. Come to my house, be in my presence. So again, I just it and not only does that event take place, but I also know this scripture here in Isaiah 2:2-3. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the tops of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God. And so again, it's prophetic. So we can analyze it, but I think tying that together with my experience kind of, for me, it locks it together pretty tight for what that what that means. And so again, it's just not a spiritual experience that I'm having. It's attached with physical things that are going on in my life. I'm finding doctrine all over the place. Even the doctrine or the idea that so I was bumping around one day, and I didn't look this one up on, so we can't share it, but I'm going to stop sharing. But one of the curious things that I was doing is just bumping around doing nothing, But I was thinking to myself about, and this is before I worked in the glass factory that I did, glass plant. But years before. But I was thinking about the earth and it's the makeup of the earth and what would happen if it were to burn on fire for 1,000 years. Because there's some indications within the Book of Mormon and other places that's what's going to happen. Like I said, it's not fully detailed in that way, but that's the understanding I got in my head from what I've read, And there's some teachings out there, sporadic teachings, but anyway, but I mold this up in my head. I said, what would happen? You got sand and all these other elements that create glass. The earth is going to eventually turn into a glass sphere, but the sun burns out. So how's that process? Well, it's from the molten lava within the earth's core, around the earth's core. Eventually, the fuel is its own self. Eventually, it starts to burn, and that's why the surface, the Earth's surface is actually getting hotter. It's not because the sun is doing it; it's actually from within. So we have insulators that are oil and water that are being removed from the Earth, and that creates less and less of that insulator from the Earth's crust. But it's meant to happen because I'm like, okay, it's supposed to turn into a glass sphere. And then later, months later, after I get into another conversation, this guy starts challenging me on another doctrine within the Doctrine and Covenants, and then I find this where it says in the Revelation where it talks about the sea of glass that this is the earth and its paradisical glory, its celestial glory. It's a glass sphere. And there's another one that says that God lives on a sphere of glass himself. And I'm like, hadn't read the Doctrine and Covenants yet. You know what I mean? I've read through it. I mean, obviously I read section 88, but I'm not really going after it. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
was, but yeah, I hadn't read that, but sure enough, the same conclusion I came up with is the same details that were laid out by Joseph Smith. I'm like, and I understand the process. I understand why it happens. It's when God speaks to his people, to his prophets especially. I don't think the words disappear into nothingness. I believe that they're out there, and for those who are in tune within that frequency, can actually obtain those same words, because everything to God is now. So when he speaks, it's still the now for him compared to where we're at. So whatever he's speaking to us at the same time, but we have to be available to receive it. And so it's like this, and I've transformed it this way. When we send our communication to the Voyager probe, it takes a day or so. I can't remember the time lapse that it takes for that communication to go and come back. But it's intact all the way to the Voyager over a period of time. It doesn't just dissolve into nothingness. But we know that it's sent because the Voyager replies in kind. But its duration. So if we can do that mechanically as we do, then God's words that he speaks are eternal, and they always stay in a way that we can actually receive them when we're in that, when it's available to us, whether we are meditating and or whether we are, or he wants us to receive it. Either way, but I'm just saying it's there. So like I said, for me, there's a lot there. I've got so many other stories. And I know that we've been going on for 2 hours now. Appreciate all the time. And I know
No
that,
doubt.
and I don't want, so if you got any questions, I've got more time, but I don't want to take up from yours.
My wife just got home, so I'm gonna have to let you go, AJ. This is on your Facebook, right?
No, I didn't do that. I'm going to download this
Okay.
to my YouTube, and I'm going to go on to Facebook. And then
Yeah, perfect. If you just send that link to me, I'll get some questions wrote up, and maybe we can do this again soon.
Crazy stuff, huh?
Cool, man. Hey, thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you very much too for listening to me.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, you have a great day.
Hey, you too, brother.
All right,
Bye.
bye-bye.